This is not what I expected to be doing today. In fact, to be honest with you, I never thought that I would be doing this. And shoveling is not what I'm talking about, but shoveling where I'm going to is. Right behind me, you can see a little bit of snow accumulating along the bottom of this wall. That wall is the garden side of the new bathroom. And I'm working on a new project in there, and I didn't expect to have to work outside in order to work inside. But let me show you what I started to do inside and what I discovered. And then we'll get back to why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Uh-oh. I was just pulling up the edging of the floor in here, and I noticed that there was some moisture. You can see right there that there's a spot of water on the floor. And if you look here, there is a dark line where this sill log is wet right here. I'm glad this happened when it did. Before there was more snow here that would be almost impossible to clear away due to compaction and ice buildup. As frustrating as this situation is, I do consider myself fortunate that I discovered this issue now and not further on in the winter or even next spring when more water damage would have occurred to those sill logs of the bathroom here. Over the years that I've lived here, I have never cleared the snow away from the walls of my cabin because I've not seen any water damage. This area of Alaska is one of the more dry areas. Here it is about 30 degrees outside, and there's no moisture coming from my breath, and that's because it's so dry here that as soon as I breathe out my hot, moist air or breath, that moisture is just automatically absorbed into the air. The snow here is really dry as well. So again, I've not been proactive about clearing snow away. And originally my plan was to build an awning over this area. Let's talk about some of the things that needs to be done on the outside of the cabin still. As I've mentioned previously, I need to sand down the cabin and restain it. There's also some rot out here. At the base of the Arctic entry, dirt was allowed to accumulate around the three sides of it, and that dirt was basically holding in moisture from rain and snow over the course of the seasons year after year, and that actually caused the bottom logs of the Arctic entry to sustain some rot. And pulled that dirt away. Hopefully that will have a chance to dry out and solidify up a little bit. Right now it doesn't appear to be too bad, but if it doesn't seem to, firm up a bit, then at some point I'll have to call someone in to remedy that for me. The roof line of the Arctic entry is actually going to be brought forward to the very front of the cabin. Creating that covered area right there will allow Kenai a place to go out during inclement weather. It'll allow me to have a dry area to stand while I'm trying to enter the Arctic entry, should it be raining or snowing. I chose not to do it because of the expense. Now, this wall here in particular, for the last few years, has had plywood and other building materials stacked against it, so I couldn't really even see the wall to tell you what had been happening. But this wall behind me is the only, or one of only two walls in my cabin that does not have something up against it. On the main part of the cabin, there's paneling for the most part. So this wall, I've not seen any water damage. I've not seen any water damage in my basement either, despite the fact that I haven't cleared the snow away. And in this area, the snow will slide off and continue to compact and build up. Just from this one snowstorm that we got a couple of days ago that dropped about a foot of snow, what has slid off the roof in just this one area has allowed about 3 feet of snow to build up on top of this water storage tank behind me. And in this area alone, just from the snowfall, on average, the snow will compact and build up with ice and what have you to about the top of that window grate right there, which is about 6 feet up in the air. It's a lot of work to try to maintain clearing the snow away from the edges of this cabin, but I think I need to come up with a couple of solutions here. For one thing is, as you can see down here between the peat moss bag and the water storage tank, you can see that black line down there. That is a vapor barrier that is on the outside of the root cellar wall. But unfortunately, there's no sill cap on that. And so snow was allowed to sit on top of that, and then of course could bleed in to the cabin itself. So I need to get some metal flashing on there to, again, keep that dry. There is nothing like that here on this side either. You can see this little plywood piece that's sitting right here. That definitely allows snow to build up on there. And then as it melts again, it's going to create water damage in that bathroom. I made a promise to the previous owners when I bought this cabin that my goal was to not only maintain this cabin and keep it standing, but to basically restore it. I'm sure it was a lovely home when they lived in it, and I'm sure they've had a bunch of fabulous memories over their time here. My goal is to also maintain it for myself and for future generations. So I need to come up with a solution for this. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the awning this year. Again, I put that on hold, or thought, well, that's not really going to happen due to expense, but it might need to happen in the future. So let me show you what I'm going to do now instead. I did have the roof replaced a number of years ago when I first moved in here because it was an old farm roof that was collapsing. I know there's a lot of you that are probably like, I'm so tired about hearing about your roof. But that roof replacement has been an integral part of keeping this cabin standing. I'm going to need to make sure that the snow that piles up here, like I said, feet tall, doesn't have the opportunity to get in areas like this where there's a check in the log. A check is when there's a big crack in a log, especially on a horizontal plane when you have the logs sideways like this, and moisture can set in there, and then that can cause internal rotting of those logs, which was one of the reasons why you should never paint a log cabin. This log cabin, unfortunately, was painted many, many years ago, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just continue with that and repaint it. But after giving it some serious consideration, I don't think that's the direction I'm going because, again, I don't want to trap moisture in these logs and cause any future damage. Luckily, I still have some scrap material from when that roof was replaced. And again, this is only going to be a temporary solution for this winter, and it might not even work as I'm hoping. But what my plan is snap together a bunch of panels like this and then lean them up against the cabin wall. Now these probably won't stay up on their own. In fact, I know they won't. So I might have to just come back in with a couple nails or some other way to position these so that they'll stay upright. But this would at least keep the snow off the logs as much as possible. It's always something when you have an old house. I'm gonna keep working on this, but I'll meet you back inside and I'll show you exactly why I'm ripping up the floor that I just put down in that bathroom. And no, it's not because of the moisture. So yes, I am pulling up the flooring that I just installed, but I'm not removing all of the flooring in this room. I'm only removing this one corner of the room. And when you hear why, you're probably gonna think, man, you do things so backwards. You shouldn't have you had done this project before laying the floor? And maybe I should have. But when I laid the floor initially, I didn't really know how this project was all going to come together. I hadn't fully thought it out in advance. So now that I have had the time to really think about this next project and everything that needs to be done to make it come to fruition, I realize I need to pull up the flooring. But I don't need to remove all of the flooring. I just need to remove it in this one section. Now I'm doing my best to keep these planks in order as I pull them up because some of these will be going back down in the exact same way that they were laid originally, while others might need to be amended a little bit, shall we say. But before I start working any further on the floor, maybe I should tell you why I'm doing this. So if you have not seen the video where I originally came up with a concept plan for this bathroom, I will leave a link to that at the end of this video where you can click on a little pop-up window that'll come up and you can watch it there. However, in that original concept, I had planned on putting a bench here that was going to house my composting toilet and all the things necessary, such as the ash that goes to covering any of the waste and tissue paper, things like that. But as I began to begin the design of that bench, because I had not actually seen a bench like that available anywhere, it was some Google image I had sourced, I began to realize I couldn't afford to build that bench. It was like $400 in materials for just that one bench. And I was like, ooh, that's way out of my budget. The other thing is I didn't feel confident in the fact that I would be able to build the bench. While I have done a lot of things in this room that I think turned out really, really well, like putting up the cedar plank, the faux beams, the faux window a la mural up above my head here, and installing this floor in here, the bench was a little bit out of my comfort zone. And so I began to come up with some other concepts of how could I house my toilet and not detract from the overall Victorian feel of this room, because my toilet is a very modern composting toilet. It does not have that Victorian flair to it whatsoever. So a friend of mine suggested that maybe I house my toilet in an armoire. I thought she was crazy when she suggested it. It did not really register with me. I kept thinking that doesn't make any sense. Armoires are very narrow. You'd have to step up into it. I began to see a whole host of problems, and I was not a fan of the idea. But she was kind of onto something. And so the more I began to think about the bench versus the armoire, and what used to be in this room, which was a closet that sat right here, hence this line behind me on the wall that is all faded because of where the closet used to sit, I began to think, well, maybe I just cordon off part of this room and house the toilet in there so that I don't have to see it. And should I ever have a guest over, that they would have a place to come in and feel like they could use the facilities indoors if they didn't want to use the outhouse, and not have to worry about being spied upon, because I don't really plan on closing the curtains in this bathroom on a normal basis. Like, I like the light coming in from the outside. So I'm building myself a little toilet stall, if you will. You'll have to stick around to see what it's going to look like in the end, but I have a lot of work to do. So I'm going to continue getting this floor pulled up, and then I'll check back in with you in a moment. The reason I had to take up the floor in the bathroom is because I plan on framing in this new bathroom stall. And luckily for me, a few months back, I picked up a ton of 2x4s. And you're probably thinking, if you couldn't afford to build a bench, how could you afford all those 2x4s? Well, the 2x4s actually only cost me about a quarter of the amount that bench was going to cost me. So nonetheless, I'm down here cutting up the pieces that I need now. I took all my measurements and I checked them so many times I drove myself mad in actually doing so. But before I do any of my cuts, I created a cut list so that I know exactly what I need to cut. And as I cut each one, then I'll be marking off the final dimensions of that piece of lumber so that I don't mix it up with any of the others as I begin to frame out the new toilet stall. When I bought this cabin, one of the things that really appealed to me was that there weren't too many built-ins or fixtures that I needed to remove in order to make this cabin feel like my own. And I don't want to do anything that jeopardizes the integrity of this cabin, or that when someone goes to remove it, it's going to leave a permanent scar that is going to be almost impossible to cover up. I had seen where someone had framed in a wall in their log cabin, and they literally carved out a channel within the logs in order to put in that wall. That's fine if you know that that's going to be forever your home and you can't foresee anybody ever wanting to change up the layout of the cabin. But this room was never built as a bathroom, and I don't know that someone is going to want to utilize it the way that I plan on doing in years to come once, my time is up here on this earth. So that's why everything I'm doing is temporary. A few nails inside of these logs is not going to make any difference in the world. Now that I have the first wall up and have it plumb, level, and fully secured to the wall, it is not going anywhere, which is good because this wall is going to determine how the rest of the room lays out. If this was off in any one direction, then it would mean the rest of the room is going to have issues. But now that this is all set in place and is perfect, I can move on and begin to frame out the rest of this room. Diagram, and without this I'm lost. This is basically the map to this little room because it's not a simple box. Remember that cabinet that I redid a couple weeks ago? That's an integral part of this room, and because of that there's some angles in here that I needed this for. So luckily I found it, and now hopefully I can get this all to come together without making a mistake. Because this is such a small room, I'm not following standard framing practices. Well, I am, but I've deviated slightly, meaning that my studs are not placed 16 on center or 24 on center for that matter. I basically took the width of my wall, divided it by the number of studs that I'm using, and then that determined where each stud would be placed. And I did the same thing on these two walls. This one that's standing up on its side and this one that's laying down on the floor. But where I deviated also was that I used a 4x4 in the corner of this. And the reason that I did that is because I'm going to be putting some very heavy pieces in this wall that I need to make sure that this wall doesn't have any play and that it is as stout as can be without being overkill. So the 4x4 worked as opposed to using multiple 2x4s to get the same effect. And what I've done here is I went ahead and I attached that 4x4 to the bottom plate where I'm going to toenail this into the floor. But I cut my top plate just shy of that 4x4 on this wall. And on this wall, I ran my top plate longer so that that 4x4 sits in there nicely. And then what I'll do is I'll nail this header, this is not a header, this top plate into the 4x4, nail this top plate down at an angle into this 2x4, and then that'll hold it all together, and I'll stand it upright. And then I don't have to worry about having an extra set of hands in here either to help stabilize these walls when I put them up. By having this corner, I should be able to do this all by myself. So I just wanted to explain, because for those of you who are watching at home, you're probably thinking, what in the world is she doing? Well, hopefully that helps to explain it and makes a little bit more sense. Now if I could just get the 4x4 to stay still while I do this. All right, now another test of my strength here is to lift this up and position it. Voila! All right, now I gotta drag it forward. You guys are so good for sticking with me through all my harebrained ideas and projects that I do. I know there are some of you who say that you learn a lot from me, but if you learn anything, I would say get help. You know, ask for some assistance. You don't have to do everything yourself like I tend to do. All right. So now that I have that roughly positioned, I need to do a couple other things here. So on this wall here, I've already put in my king stud and 2 jacks. When you're putting in a door, because I'm putting in a pair of doors here in case you haven't figured that out by now. When you're putting in a door, you only need 1 jack stud, but I am doing 2 because I am doing a little overkill on this project here. And this piece of wood here that I'm moving is just a piece of scrap subfloor, so 1-inch plywood. And I just cut that to the rough opening length of, or the width of my doors. And so that way I know that I can go ahead and put these pieces in. I'm just gonna lay them down for now. I'm not going to actually tack them in just yet. But I need to know my positioning for when I go to secure this wall. Well, that's the rough idea of where that's going to go. And like I said, there's some heavy pieces that are going to be attached to these walls. In this opening here, where I'm standing, this corner, this is where that corner cabinet that I just worked on is actually going to sit. And it's a little top heavy. It kind of wants to lean forward. So once this is all secured into place and this room is built, that's actually going to get attached to this corner wall so that it can't topple over. And again, Alaska's famous for earthquakes. I have yet myself to feel anything other than a 1-second earthquake here. It was enough to rattle my screens on my computers, and by the time I got out of my chair, it was over. But the other day there was an earthquake about 5 miles from my home, but I never felt it. It was really minor, but earthquakes happen all the time in Alaska. So I want to be as proactive as I can. All right, so enough rambling about that. I need to get this wall into place. Can't nail anything in until I have everything positioned. And this is the one that I'm actually afraid of toppling over, because I actually have a piece of furniture in here already that I haven't shown, and I don't want this to fall and break it. So fingers crossed that I can do this without anything falling and without braces. If I can, I'll be absolutely amazed. One other thing is I'm really wishing that this was all done because A, I'd like to use my bathroom, and 2 is I keep misplacing things because I have stuff everywhere. And I'd like to get everything put in its place. I'd also like to have all my tools organized again. The cellar is almost as much of a disaster as everywhere else in the cabin is. And so I'm really anxious to get all of this done. All right, this one is square. That's good. It's tight up against my king and jack studs here and my rough opening template. Just making sure this one is square in here. The light in here is changing rapidly because the sun is setting. And unfortunately, I might not be able to get this room finished before this video needs to be edited. And there's still, like I said, a lot to be done in this room. Not only do I need to get this room framed in, but I need to finish this room out, put the flooring back in, get the doors hung, and also then put in all the finishing touches in this room. So this room, or this video is just going to be about this framing project that I'm doing. I wish I could show you more, but sometimes, you know, when you're working on a deadline and you're doing things by yourself, there just isn't enough time to get everything done. And especially when certain things just take forever to get figured out, such as this wall here that I'm touching. Once I got everything stood up, it took me a moment to get this wall stabilized because there is a gap between this stud and this beam behind it. And what I wound up doing was drilling some holes top and bottom and then putting in some 6-inch timber locks. And that has this wall stabilized. It is plumb and level. And now I'm working on getting this corner put in. I've already checked it with my 4-foot level and I know that it is also plumb front and side. So I put a clamp on here so it doesn't move on me. I'm gonna go ahead and nail this in and then I'm gonna begin to rough in my door opening. I'm gonna have someone come over and help me with the doors. They are way too heavy for me to lift into place by myself. If it was just a single door, I could do it. Even if it was just some standard French doors, I could probably do it. But these are some solid wood, double pane glass doors that I'm putting in there that I got also off of Facebook Marketplace. I have to tell you, Facebook Marketplace has been my best friend through this whole process. I got some amazing pieces that I'm putting in this bathroom, and it cost me way less to do this and pick up all those pieces than it did to build that bench I was talking about at the beginning of this video. A lot of times I get asked, why is it that I'm alone? Not just the name, but why is it that I actually live alone? Why is it that I moved to Alaska alone and don't have anybody else in my life? Well, it might be that I drive people crazy, those that are working with me at least, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. You guys have said it yourself. Oh, you're way too hard on yourself. Probably, but I do like things to be done right, especially because I'm the one that's got to live with the end results. But because I've taken my time to make sure that the walls that I have installed in already are plumb and level, that means that this wall is also plumb on both sides. So with that being said, I need to toenail this in. However, before I do that, what I would like to do is make sure that the front of this wall and the front of that wall are on the same plane, meaning that I don't want one side of the room to be kicked out more than the other, even by a fraction of an inch, because it'll make my door install that much more difficult. It means that my door might bind up, or that when I go to put on my casings, that I have some issues getting them to line up appropriately in the corners. So what I've done is I've taken and installed a screw top and bottom of each side of the opening here, and now I just have a string that I've attached to the top screw there, and I'm going to wrap it around the bottom screw on this side, the bottom screw on this side, and then come back up over the top of the last screw there. And I'm going to make this taut here so I can let go of it, and I'm actually going to step on this so I can do this. And all I want to see is that where these two lines intersect, that they're touching. And if they're not touching, that means that I need to take a moment to adjust my wall before I toenail it in. And that way I can make sure that everything, like I said, is on the same plane. However, because again, I've taken my time to do things right into my standards, which you can tell are very high, they are touching. So I don't need to make any adjustments. I'm gonna bring the camera over, I'm gonna show you this, and then I'm gonna toenail this in, and then I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna rough in my door, and then I'm gonna have someone come over and help me install the doors. So this is what you wanna see, that when the strings are allowed to rest on their own, that they're actually touching. And that means that this wall is on the same plane as the wall behind it, and that my hard work is paying off. Now, I get asked a lot of times about where did I learn all these skills that I show on my channel. And some of it is from my upbringing, such as my cooking came from my mom. Even though my mom swears she didn't teach me how to cook, she allowed me to be in the kitchen with her when she was cooking. And therefore, I got to experience flavors and experiment with spices and different recipes. And that fueled my desire to cook and experiment more in the kitchen. And also have an appreciation for flavor. But when it comes to things like this basic framing skills that I have, This came partly from my grandfather, who owned a construction business and allowed me to tag along with him sometimes, or my dad. And I picked up some of the basic framing skills there, but some I also picked up from watching TV shows like This Old House or New Yankee Workshop, things like that. And then others I picked up from watching YouTube. So that's why I show some things on this channel. Not that this is a how-to channel, it's about my life here, but I know, like I said previously, there are some of you that say that you learn a lot from my channel. So if I learn something, I'm excited to share it with you. Hence why I shared with you this little rope string trick to make sure everything is on one plane. So if you're installing a door, whether it's a double door or a single door, you'll have better success as well, because this is something I had not ever been shown before until I just saw it on YouTube. You may have noticed that when I was tacking in my king and jack studs, that there is some play in this wall. But when this wall is at rest, it is still plumb on all sides. So I'm completely good with that. Besides, when I put my header on for my rough opening for my doors, that's going to tighten all this up, because this is going to get tacked to that, and it'll be tacked over there as well. So there will not be any play in this wall once it's all said and done. Besides that, once the sheathing goes on and that corner cabinet that I worked on in the last couple videos is going to sit in this corner here, it's also going to get attached to this. So everything is going to become stabilized here momentarily. But I need to go get the header made and attached up here. And then I also need to stain my doors. The doors I picked up off of Facebook Marketplace, as I mentioned, and they just were not the right color for this room. They were a little bit too, I don't know, brown, but not the right color brown. And I wanted them to be more mahogany so they would match closer to that cabinet that's going in here. In order to make the doors look like I needed them to, I began by giving them a base coat of gunstock, which is the same color stain I used on my kitchen counters. That gave them an orangish undertone. And then I came back over the top of that with some bare Bombay mahogany stain. Now, I did not film that because it was very difficult to work with. It dries very, very quickly. It's a stain that I'd not used before. But when they dried, they were absolutely gorgeous, and they matched the color tone of the other pieces of furniture that are now going to go into the bathroom. So this is what they look like before, and here's what they look like now. And here's what the doors look like now that they're in. They are beautiful, if I do say so myself. I'm so happy with how they turned out. Now, unfortunately, I did not film putting in the header or building the jambs or installing the doors, because I was kind of under a time crunch because of when my friend was available to come over and help me. I also put in some blocking, which I did not film also, again, just because I was trying to get everything done before they showed up. But when you go to install doors, they always tell you that you want 2 inches of play, 2 inches of extra room, that is, on the sides for your door install, so that you have a bit of wiggle room in there. I had 1/4 of an inch. That's it. So that meant 1/8 of an inch on either side, and only 1/8 of an inch on top as well. However, the doors went in without a hitch. In fact, it's only one door that opens. The other one is a side light. As you can see, the insides of these doors are painted white. They are going to get a different color of paint on them when all is said and done. But they don't bind up. The door moves smoothly. I have enough clearance in here that it'll clear the floor once the floor goes back in, as well as a rug that will be going in here. And they are absolutely beautiful. So as I mentioned earlier, there's still a lot to be done in this room, but I promise you, the very next time you see this room, it will be when I'm putting in all the finishing touches and the grand reveal of this room. So make sure that you're subscribed and you have turned on bell notifications. Also, I want to say thank you to everybody who attempted to join my live stream. However, my microphone had quit working, and so I had to cancel it just as soon as I started it. I will be doing another live stream. I'm going to go into town and get a microphone. Hopefully Saturday I'll be doing a live stream, but either way, on Saturday, Rob and Sarah over at the Curmudge Inn are having a live stream, and I believe Adam from Alaska Cut the Cord will be joining them. And if I'm able to get my microphone, I will be following up immediately after theirs with my own live stream. So make sure you join theirs and then join me on mine. And also, I want to encourage everybody to go over and give some well wishes to Nomi over at the Gnomestead, My Alaska. I believe that is his current channel name. Sorry, I don't keep up on all the changing of channel names around here. But nonetheless, he has been in the hospital with some heart issues. So if you could go over and pay him a visit on his channel and give him some well wishes, that'd be great. Also, another friend of mine, which is Bill Dixon over at the Pungo Prairie, has suffered a loss of a friend recently. Both of these gentlemen have wonderful channels that if you're not familiar with them, I highly encourage you to check them out. So pay them a visit and give them some well wishes. In the meantime, please stay tuned to this channel because there is a lot more coming up here, and I promise you a grand reveal next time. So until then, stay safe and take care and enjoy these videos here.